In 2002, The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker released off the backs of two of the most commercially and critically successful games of all time, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. The game initially had mixed reviews, with some people just not meshing with the brighter, more cartoonish graphics. Especially after seeing the Space World 2000 Zelda tech demo, which seemed to advance the graphics and art style present in the two Nintendo 64 classics. It was not what Nintendo needed at the time. After okay sales numbers from their big launch title Luigi's Mansion, and unexpectedly low sales from their follow-up to Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, now was not the time to release a Zelda game so drastically different from what the series was known as up until this point. You can see these differences from the moment you boot up the game. A bright, cheery title screen with a laid-back fiddle tune and a tropical background is quite different from the looming threat of a falling moon. Characters are now far more expressive and have a bit more personality to them thanks to the art style and animation, choosing to highlight things like a character's walk, the way they hold themselves, how their face changes to respond to environmental circumstances. Like, take a look at this kid, walking around like he owns the island. This little boy doesn't even pay any bills. While now, The Wind Waker is commonly seen as one of the better-aged Zelda games, that came only after decades of revisionism from Zelda fans, and Wind Waker is now seen as one of Nintendo's strongest titles from the GameCube. It was even good enough to be the first of the two GameCube Zelda titles to receive an HD remake, beating out the darker, more serious younger brother, Twilight Princess, which you'd think would have come first, considering how many people praise the game's overall aesthetic. But I'm not here to talk about any of that. Mostly because I wouldn't even know where to begin organizing my thoughts on the game. To me, Wind Waker's legacy will never be in the game's story, gameplay, or even its impact. No. My formative experiences with The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker were never made through the game itself, but through the game's demo included in The Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition, released for the Nintendo GameCube in November of 2003. Before Nintendo became the greedy overlords of the video game business that we know them as today, back during the GameCube era, they were a little more down to earth, a little more understanding to consumer wants, and a little more desperate. With both Microsoft and PlayStation kicking their ass in the video game market at the time, Nintendo had to be willing to make some sacrifices. That's why we got the Player's Choice line of games, allowing Nintendo to re-release their games, this time at a substantially lower price. One of the things Nintendo put out to try and keep their player base while also drawing in new fans of video games was The Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition for the GameCube. While originally the title was only available through the Club Nintendo catalog, costing 500 points initially and then dropping to a staggeringly low 150 points later down the line, over here in America this came bundled with many GameCube consoles, giving many consumers a great value title right off the bat. The Collector's Edition included The Legend of Zelda and The Adventure of Link from the NES, those two games is first of what would become many re-releases, as well as the relatively recent releases of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, which had only come out 5 and 3 years prior, respectively. But that wasn't all. Like many other compilation titles released for the console, this one came with some baked-in goodies, like a promotional movie, a retrospective on the whole series up to this point, and the topic of today's video, a playable demo for The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker. At the time, the only Zelda game on GameCube. It may seem a little odd for a game demo to come included in another title from the series. Usually these sorts of things are meant to draw in people who haven't experienced the series up until this point. So including both a promotional movie and playable demo to the newest game in a series inside what is the most comprehensive collection for said series seems a little odd. Like, if you have the collection, you by now definitely have the shiny new game. But for someone like me at the time, 5 years old, my only exposure to video games being Sonic of all things, this was kind of crazy. When I first experienced this game, I didn't have a home video game console of my own. Every Saturday morning, my brother and I would accompany my mom to the gym. While she'd be burning calories, we'd be dicking off in the little kids' room. And since I was at the ripe old age of 5, I got to join the other big kids upstairs with the GameCube. Low ceilings, tangled controller wires, and the occasional yell from downstairs to keep it quiet. Oh, how I miss you. Among the many games we, but mostly they, played since I was the youngest of them all, the Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition was one of them. And despite watching or playing full Zelda games in that collection, it was the Wind Waker demo that stood out to me the most. As I alluded to earlier, I never got much time to play, only really being able to sit down and enjoy something in the handful of times we went during the non-busy gym hours. Whenever I did get to boot up the Collector's Edition, there would always be plenty of save files, and it's not like I could just hop in and carry on. I had no idea what to do. You can't just throw me in the Stone Tower Temple in Majora's Mask and expect a 5-year-old who had not played the game up to this point to know what to do. But it turns out that one feature of that game worked out perfectly with my predicament: the Wind Waker demo. The developers were actually quite generous when it came to what was offered in this demo. Since Zelda is quite a difficult game to summarize in just the short time block of a demo, 3 different save files were available to you upon booting up. One shows off one of the dungeons of the game, Dragon Roost Cavern. The second showing off the game's stealth section in the Forsaken Fortress. And the last, and my personal favorite, Windfall Island. Each save file allowed you only 20 minutes to check out everything the game had to offer before booting you back to the title screen. But those small time blocks were perfect for a kid playing a game that was not his, who could be pulled away from it at any moment when his mom decides that she's done with her workout. I definitely spent the most time on the Windfall Island save. There's simply so much for you to do and explore. I would talk to every NPC, even though this was before my brain really developed and I got good with understanding things like context clues. I'd swim laps around the island, even though it did nothing. Hang out at the docks, waiting for something that I didn't know would never arrive. Even when there wouldn't be anything to do, when I've talked to all the NPCs and stared at their faces very attentively, explored every nook and cranny, cut down every stray blade of grass, I'd still just walk or swim around. For someone who loved swimming and water at the time like I did, this was always an aspect of Wind Waker that I appreciated more than other Zelda games once I got around to playing them. Every time I got to boot up that demo, it felt more and more like I was getting drip-fed content from something I never get to experience. And that experience, getting to play something, not making any substantial progress, just getting to absorb what the game was, that's a feeling I miss today. While today I would never just replay the same 20-minute section of gameplay, never making any progress, I'll always love this perception of Wind Waker that I had when I was younger. Even if the full game left me with a drastically different opinion on the game than what I had at age 5 with the demo, even if Wind Waker is my least favorite of all the 3D Zelda games, no game has had this lingering effect on me. And that's why the demo for The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, included in the Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition for the Nintendo GameCube, will always be a demo that I will never forget. Thanks for watching.